Cathelina Duvert, how are you?
I'm good, Rich. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your story with the Caritas.
Yes, of course.
Let me give the audience a brief introduction here for you so they get a feel for who you are before we dive in.
Sure.
You're a graduate of Hofstra University with a BA in creative writing and literature. You combine academic grounding with lived experience to inspire others through writing and teaching. You're an award-winning author and mental health advocate, recognized for your authentic voice and advocacy in creative and mental health spaces. You're honored by Black Writers Workspace 24 and 25, celebrated for literary excellence, including an honorable mention in the Chapter 1 writing competition, an AWP writer to writer mentee for season 22. You're selected for the Association of Writers and Writing Program mentorship, highlighting your emerging literary impact. You're the author of the book The Box, your debut novel, which explores themes of identity, depression, and resilience, earning critical attention within indie literary circles. And you also serve as a seventh and ninth grade ELA teacher, where you've also founded a creative writing club to foster student voice and storytelling. Incredible work that you're doing and
Thank
have
you.
done. I only have one question,
Oh,
structure, when I
okay.
start off these conversations, and it's always the first one. Where were you born and what was life like as a kid for Kathy?
Okay, so I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Um, and we didn't stay in Brooklyn long, so I don't consider myself a Brooklynite or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, we moved to Queens when I was 4 years old. And I've been a Queens girl ever since. And
Yeah.
what was life like growing up? Um, it was good. It had its moments. I am Haitian American. My parents were both from Haiti.
Okay.
And so we grew up in a strict Haitian household. So I guess anybody who grows up in a Haitian household knows that life can be pretty tough with the parents. Because they hold us to a certain standard and are pretty rough with it. But that's what we know. Um, it was, and we have such a close knit family with my mom was very close to her siblings, and so because they were so close, we grew up so close to our cousins, and our cousins were more like extended siblings to us than cousins. Um,
Okay.
but it was, yeah, um, yeah, that's what I'm trying to think of anything else. But if you have any questions,
Yeah.
that.
How about elementary school? Were
Okay.
you one of the kids that would sit towards the back of the class, or were you interested in sitting up front and so you could pay close attention and raise your hand pretty quick?
Quite honestly, think I don't remember. I think I was friendly with other students, but I went to a Catholic school from kindergarten to eighth grade.
Okay.
So, and every year we were given seat assignments. So I never chose where I sat. Um,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
so it was, but given what I know about myself, I probably would have sat up front because, all the cool kids tend to go towards the back, and I wasn't one of the cool kids. So, but yeah, I did have friends. I was friendly with some of the other kids in school, mostly the girls. Um, I have a twin sister. We are fraternal twins. And at that age, we weren't as close as we are now. I don't think we liked each other very much. We kind of resented always having to. dress the same and go everywhere together. So I think we resented that about each other. So though we tolerated each other, I don't think we were that close at that age. So she had her own friends, I had my own friends, and I had like maybe one or two people that I was closest to, I guess. To be quite honest, I don't really remember the nature of my friendships with the kids in the school, but I know my sister always had a lot more friends than I had. Um,
Got you.
yeah.
D- Do you know who came first, you or your sister?
My sister.
She
But
did.
yeah, but I always tell everybody it's only because the doctors took her out first. That's it. My
Okay.
mom had it was a cesarean birth, and she was the first one out. But my sister was, to be fair to her, she was a lot bigger than I was when
Got
we
you.
were born. So when my mom was pregnant with us, she did not know she was having twins, and she had been gaining a lot of weight, and the doctor even told her that she needs to lose weight because she's getting too big. And he didn't
Oh,
know that she was having twins. Um, I think it was just, the the health her health coverage at the time that wasn't very good.
right.
But yeah, and so we were born premature. I wish I knew how many weeks premature we were. I don't really know, but I was so much smaller than my sister that I had to be put in the incubator for a couple of weeks, and my sister didn't have to. My
Oh,
mom my mom ended up going home without both of us, and then she came back like I think maybe a week later or something. She was able to take my sister home, but I still had to stay in the incubator.
that's interesting. So did she even get to hold you guys when you were first born, or were you taken straight to the NICU
You
side
know,
of the hospital?
I I wish I knew. I don't think that's a question that we ever asked my mom. Or maybe we did. Maybe my sister knows and I don't. But yeah, I don't know that answer.
Okay. That's interesting though, as well, that you spent a few weeks still at the hospital before you were able to actually go
Mhm,
home,
mhm.
to what would be considered your true home.
Yeah,
You're kind of held up in a holding pattern, uh,
yeah.
which is interesting. Eh, What type of work did your father and mother do when you guys were a kid?
My father was a New York City cab driver.
Okay.
And yeah, and it wasn't until and my mom always had different jobs. She'd be there was at one point she was working late night in an office cleaning up, emptying the trash, doing that. Later I mean, and she was always going to school, right? She was always getting her certificates in one thing or another. She liked education, like moving up like that. So she didn't always stay as somebody who worked cleaning up after people, but eventually, she worked in an office in an insurance company. She worked at Dime Saving Bank at one point. She just had a number of different jobs. I really appreciate, it wasn't until later that I really appreciated how my mom was always like, I got to move on to the next thing. But my
Yeah.
father, he was a New York City cab driver, but it wasn't until my early 20s when he had already um, retired that I learned and understood that he wasn't just a cab driver, he owned his own company,
Oh, wow.
yeah, he had 2 medallions, he had somebody working for him, and I found it so impressive, and I kind of wish that it was something that was talked about with pride at home so that we could understand that my father was immigrant who came to the US. He did something that not a lot of people were doing at the time, and he managed to have his own company in New York City and thrive with it. I mean, he owned his house. He got us all through Catholic school, and that's not cheap. Um,
Right.
so I was really proud. I am not was I am really proud of both my parents. My mother was always looking to um, you know, increase her station in terms of work, and my father owned his own company, and he was he was somebody who took his priorities as a father and as a husband very, very seriously. And I really, really appreciate that about them.
Yeah, they took that American opportunity to heart
Yeah.
coming here
Oh,
and
absolutely.
grabbed up as much as they possibly could in terms of betterment of themselves.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Very fascinating. Being at the Catholic school, did you find that as restricting as what it was like being at home with that Haitian cultural, uh, you know, stringency, so to speak?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I ever saw it like that. This
Okay.
was all I knew. I think I regarded each of them as its own entity, I guess. If I were to say, I would say that being, growing up in the Haitian household was a lot more stricter than the Catholic school.
Yeah.
Although our teachers, they were mostly nuns, although they were very strict on us in, one would say like abusive.
Right.
um,
Now,
it wasn't like it was at home. Like there was a different type of fear at home. Like my
okay.
mother was a disciplinarian and she was not afraid to hit us and she would hit us with a belt or anything that she found handy. And
Right.
for a very long time, I believed that that was the best way to discipline children because I felt like it worked on me. So if I were to ever have children, I felt like this is what I'm going to do with my own children. But
Yeah.
so my mom was a disciplinarian. She she was very handed, and we were afraid of her, and we knew what was expected of us as her children, and we knew what was expected of us as students in a Catholic school as well. We, like the idea of having wearing uniforms every day. Kids today, as a teacher right now, I'm in a school where the students have to wear uniforms, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just choose to come in their regular clothing, and I would have never dared to do something like that. Not only would I have gotten in trouble with the nuns, which I didn't want to do, I would also get in trouble by my parents, which I definitely didn't want happen.
Yeah.
Um, but 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 being in that school, that same school from kindergarten to 8th grade, I mean, we knew the rules. We knew what we could get away with, and we knew what we couldn't get away with. So I feel like it was okay, and this is what we understood, and it was no big deal. And growing up at home, I knew that if I had a failing grade on an assignment, I would get in trouble, and getting in trouble meant getting hit. And even though that upset me, I would cry about it at school. Um, I knew that this was what was going to happen, and this was what was, I guess, accepted because I was just a child, and I didn't, and my parents were who they were, and so we just didn't try to escape that fate.
For sure. For sure. Did that create a sense of anxiety early on in your life?
It probably did, and I never realized it.
Yeah.
Um, I think so because so here's the thing. We knew that if we failed an exam, we would get hit.
Okay.
And yet I was always failing exams and crying about it. Like, oh no, I'm gonna get hit, I'm gonna get hit. So
Yeah.
sometimes I wonder, like, well, what was the deal? What did I do to ensure that I did not fail? And I don't really remember what my mindset was back then in
Okay.
terms of passing a test. Like for me, studying meant trying to memorize everything. And we know that we don't learn that way. It wasn't
Yeah.
trying to understand the information, more that trying to memorize it. So I just didn't know how to study, I guess. And that was the best way that I could study. And I yeah, I think that that led to a certain amount of anxiety because as I studied trying to memorize the thing, I'm studying because I don't want to get hit. I don't want to fail and get hit. But then while I'm taking the test, I'm like, oh no, I don't know this information. I don't want to get hit. And then when we get the test back, I see a failing grade, and my parents had to sign failing exams, and I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna get hit. So yeah, I guess I had a continuous amount of anxiety without even realizing it.
Right. I imagine so. I know that for me, I was always anxious because I just didn't fit in well with people
Mhm.
at an early age, and also too I learned more by watching people do things versus reading something in a book and then having to answer questions about it. Like, it was always hard for me to retain that information.
Uh,
Um, and who knows, I may have had a reading disability or something like that at that point in time. But I remember I could read a sentence and then think I was going to the next line, and I would read the sentence again. And by the time I got to the end of it, I realized I just read the same sentence twice. So my eyes wouldn't adjust to the lines very much. So I always had that difficulty. I was having to read stuff two or three times before I could even answer a question.
right,
Um,
right.
I just couldn't get it to sync up for me.
Were there any teachers who were able to observe this?
No, no. And that was probably part of the problem as well. And it was just never caught. So I just went through all my school like that.
And I'm sure you kept it to yourself because
Yep.
maybe feeling ashamed or embarrassed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. With your parents coming from Haiti, did you know your grandparents very much, or did you get to travel back to see them at all?
So I think my sister remembers more than I do about my father's mother. We only knew one grandparent, which was my grandfather on my mother's side. He was the only one that we knew. My grandmother on my mother's side had passed away before we were born. But in terms of my father's parents, um, no, I don't think so. I know that my father grew up having to be like the caretaker of his siblings.
Okay.
So I would have to ask my sister what she knows and understands about my father's parents. But with my mother's father, my grandfather, he was a mean guy. He wasn't like oh, that's my grandfather. No, he was just like, oh my gosh, there he goes. Oh my gosh. Because he was like always disciplining us, like telling us what we're doing wrong. I think he hit us too. I'm not really quite sure, but he wasn't a very nice guy to us. Um,
Mhm.
but he was my grandfather, so we respected him and we loved him. Um, and what he would do, like they never put him in a nursing home or anything. What he would do was like maybe stay 1 month at our house, and then the next month he would stay at another aunt's house, or so he rotated through all his kids, which were my aunts and uncles, to their
Yeah.
houses every month. And so when it was his turn to be with us, I guess we had a place for him to stay. He would fix bicycles from the neighborhood, which was nice, but I don't remember being close to him. Um, he spoke Haitian Creole, which we didn't speak very well. Um, and so our communication with him was limited already, and that's probably one of the reasons why we are very close to him.
Got you. Okay, that makes sense. Makes sense. Um, in elementary school, did you have any extracurricular activities that you enjoyed doing? Was there any sports, or did you have any extracurricular classes that you really enjoyed?
Absolutely none. None.
Okay.
I I think I think there were some, like, maybe, like, when before we graduated from the 8th grade, I think there was a track team that was set up or something, and I think I joined it because my sister wanted to join it, but I don't think I did much there. Maybe I didn't even join it, I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, I was never interested in any sports or anything like that, and I don't think in that school that they had any clubs, like, I just don't think they had any clubs, I don't remember. It's a very small
Right.
school here.
Yeah. was it close to your house or did you have to go quite a ways?
No, it was close. It was like 5 blocks away. We would walk there every day and walk back here.
Yeah, that's how it was for me. My elementary school was like 3 houses down from where I
Mhm.
lived. So I walked every day and then come
Mhm.
home walking every day.
Yeah.
As you guys got closer, you and your sister, towards the end of elementary and middle school era, did you guys still have that kind of conflicting relationship between you? Or did you start to see it potentially change around that time?
No, it was still a conflicting relationship. We were friends, I guess. We were friends. We liked each other enough, but we weren't very close. In fact, I remember, and I told my sister this, maybe about a year ago or so, and she felt really bad about this. Like, she hung out with the popular kids, and I didn't. And she had been invited to a party, and that was thrown by one of the popular kids, and I was really looking forward to going. And then she I expressed this to her and she said, "You know, you're only invited because I'm invited, right?" And I felt kind of bad about it.
Right.
And then, it didn't make me feel very good, but that
For
was the
sure.
point.
Yeah.
But, so it was like that kind of rivalry, I guess, Um, I remember there were times when we used to get into physical fights with each other. Um, we weren't very nice to each other sometimes, but it's just like, I think, regular sibling rivalry, And we didn't become close until we were in high school. But by the time we graduated 8th grade, we were sister friends, right? We were friends, but we
Yeah.
weren't really close yet.
Okay. Was there anything that you did um, up to that point to kind of alleviate some of that anxiety for yourself? Did you get into books? Did you get into anything creative to where you could get off by yourself into your own world and kind of just relax? Or was it a constant, heightened sensory scenario for you that entire time?
No, I'm gonna tell you. I did get into. I always loved writing and reading, and I did a lot of that. But I don't think I did it in order to get away from the anxiety. You
Gotcha.
know, it probably helped, but it wasn't why I did it. I didn't make that connection. I didn't, think one thing had to do with the other. I just always loved reading and writing. And we had a library just up the block from our home. Um, and and we went there quite often. And I loved checking out books. I loved check books. I loved reading. I loved all the different stories that was available to us from the library. And I did write a lot when I was younger. I wrote silly stories, like stories that like the girl who turned into a chair. For some reason, that's one story that really sticks in my mind. I don't know why. I don't know how she turned into a chair. I think, but that was one of my stories. And I remember I used to write these stories, and I would take like a regular sheet of paper. I'd fold it up and I would draw lines across it and I'd create a little book and I would have my father read it. And this is one of my favorite memories. Oh, my father was, uh, I, I, I want to say he was like an intellectual. Unfortunately,
Okay.
he didn't get a chance to finish high school. If even he got that far when he was in Haiti, but he loved reading and he was a thinker and he liked discussing ideas and I and so he was always reading and anytime and he always fell asleep on the bed with a book on his chest. And
Oh, wow.
I used to write these little books and I used to staple them and I'm like, "Here, Dad, this is my latest book." And he would read it. And one night I remember he fell asleep with my little book on his chest. And I was like, "Yeah, I've arrived," because That's what he did with his regular books, and he's doing it with mine. So I must be a writer. So I love that memory. But I used to do that. I remember. I think it was my father. I don't know. He gave us this big hardcover black book with all the, all the pages were empty inside, and we filled it. My sister loved to draw, so she drew these really nice drawings in it, and I would I would write my stories in it and draw really corny pictures. Um, I say corny because compared to hers were really nice. But it was a book that we carried around um with each other, and it had all her drawings, my stories in it, and it was nice. It was nice having something like that um to unleash our creativity in, but at the time we didn't see it like that. It was just something that we liked to do, but it was nice.
And that's interesting too, that you had this kind of rivalry, but yet when it came to that creative component, you guys kind of came together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Very,
Yeah, it
very
was
cool.
yeah.
Once you got to that point where you knew, all right, we're going to go to this next level of schooling, did you continue with Catholic school or did you guys go to public school at that point?
We did continue Catholic school. My mother really wanted us to go to the Mary Louis Academy, which was an all-girl Catholic school. And it was a college preparatory school. And I believe the main reason why she wanted us to go to that school was not only that it was Catholic, but because there would be no boys, and she didn't want us to be distracted, and she didn't want to deal with like, dating and pregnancy and all that stuff. And so that was the main reason why we went to the Mary Louis Academy. Now, my sister, so when it came time for us to choose which schools we wanted to go to, my sister really wanted to go to a Catholic school called St. Francis Prep, which was like sort of elite. And my mom wanted us to go to the same school, so I had to write down on in my choices St. Francis Prep as well, and the Mary Louis Academy, or I forgot what our third choice was. But I remember my eighth grade teacher. I'm not going to say her name because I don't want to disrespect her.
Okay.
But my eighth grade teacher, she looked at my choices and she called me up to her desk and she says, "You put St. Francis Prep here." She's like, "Well, what are your chances of getting into that school?" And I was just like, "Well, my mom told me to, write it down because my sister wanted to." And you know what she did? She said, "This is your chance of getting to that school. This is
Oh,
your
no.
second choice." Yeah. She was telling me that I have zero chance of getting to that school. And I was just like, oh man, so that made me feel real bad. Um,
Right.
but anyways, I didn't, I don't know if I went ahead and kept that as one of my choices, but with the Mary Louis Academy, my sister was accepted, but I was put on the waiting list. And
Mm,
my mom had to write them a letter saying, they're twins. I want them to go to the same school. And so they accepted me only under the condition that I go to summer school. And so that's what I did. I went to summer school just so that I could go to the Mary Louis Academy.
okay. And did that, obviously, that experience with that teacher saying that you have no chance getting in, and then you get put on the waiting list, and also a uh, prerequisite is that you have to go to summer school. Did that kind of compound in your mind of, oh man, I'm not good enough based off of this teacher's information. And then in order for me to go to the same school my sister's going to, I've got to do this extra work. That kind of compound that sense of I'm not where I need to be on the
Yeah.
intellectual level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I never had any confidence in myself as a student. Um, and it followed me all through high school. So I I had to go to summer school, and um I don't really remember um I have to admit I don't remember how I felt specifically about that, but it I I always understood that I wasn't a good student, and I
Yeah.
accepted that I wasn't a good student. Okay, I have to go to summer school for this particular school. Okay, that's what I have to do. I'm just going to try my best. I'm going to do my best, whatever, but I'm not that good of a student. So my best is like a 70 and I'll be happy with that.
Okay, got you. Got
Hmm.
you. After you complete summer school, I'm assuming they allowed you to go in as well. Okay.
Hmm.
With that, were there any of the girls from elementary, junior high that continued with you in terms of friend groups, or did you have to create a whole new environment of trying to find friends, trying to gain friends?
Yeah, a whole new environment of trying to find friends. And so we had our own set of friends when we were in elementary school. And so that's what we kind of expected to happen when we went into high school. So I started befriending a group of girls. I would have lunch with them like within the first month of school. My sister befriended a different set of girls. And I don't know how it happened, but I eventually left the group of girls that I started hanging out with, and I started hanging out with my sister's group of friends.
Okay.
Um, and that's when my sister and I started liking each other. Yeah.
Interesting. Was
Yeah.
it was it a scenario that she recognized that her friends were accepting of you that may have changed her mind?
You know what? I really don't know how it happened. I
Okay.
don't know how it happened. Somebody probably invited me to sit along with them during lunch. Maybe my sister invited me. I really don't remember how it happened.
Right.
Um, but I think it started off with me sitting with them during lunch, and
Okay.
all the girls were accepting of me. They were all very nice. Um, there were some of them were in my classes, so I just felt I was just like, okay, I'll stay here. I'll hang out with them. And the other girls that I hung out with, like at lunch with for that first month, I continued saying hi and everything. It wasn't like, you know, we're giving each other the cold shoulder or anything like that. Um, but yeah, I don't remember how it happened, but I just started hanging out with my sister's friends, and then very, very soon they became my friends as well.
Okay. As you're experiencing these new friends that are accepting of you, and now your sister's also becoming more accepting of you being around and hanging around. Um, is there any part of that that kind of affected your confidence level to where maybe you felt a little bit more comfortable?
Um, I guess I started feeling so when I was in elementary school, I felt incredibly lonely.
Yeah.
But um, when I but because of these new group of friends, I didn't always feel so lonely. I mean, there was the loneliness aspect to it. I every once in a while, what? Excuse me, I have to cough. I'm just gonna get some water, okay? So, oh, we are talking about my loneliness. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I still felt. It was funny. I've always felt, even till this day, I sometimes I feel like I don't belong. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Even among friends, among family, like there's something about me, and I think it has to do with me being an introvert. I don't know, but I sometimes I just don't feel like I belong. So even though I felt accepted by these girls, and I really really liked them, and I knew that they liked me too, there was always some aspect that I felt like a little bit, to the side, not really quite myself around them, and so that loneliness aspect never really quite left.
Okay.
It wasn't like it was when I was in elementary school.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm an introvert too. I'd rather just sit back and watch or be quiet. I'm always observant of
Mm,
everything that's going on. I'd rather I could sit and just watch people all the time and not
mm.
even try to engage, which is ironic, me having a podcast, right?
Yeah, right.
At least I get to observe the guests, ask, curious questions, different things like that. With you guys continuing in that all girl scenario going into high school, was there any point in time where boys started to become a thing on you guys' radar?
Yeah, I think very early on, it was funny. It was after school, at when we were let out, there would be a whole bunch of boys there waiting for their girlfriends, or just waiting to meet a girl, or whatever, or flirt or whatever. And
Yeah,
so it was always a thing. And we talked the girls there. I mean, we're what in freshmen in ninth grade to 12th grade. I mean, everybody was talking about boys. It was always
right,
something like so yeah, they were definitely on our radar. And what's interesting enough, even though I felt I was really, really shy, and never had a boyfriend before or anything, I always felt like I wanted a boyfriend. I wanted to have that attention from a boy, but I was also scared to experience that as well. But
right, right. As you're moving through high school, are are you starting to think about what you might want to do after you get out of high school in terms of possible career, going on for extra education, different things like that?
well, the the idea, the fact that it was non-negotiable that we're going to college.
Okay.
Right. So
It's
yeah.
our set in stone.
Yeah, it was not like, I'm gonna try to find a job after I graduate. No, we were gonna go to college. That was definitely something that my parents, both parents, were expecting of us. And being that we were going to a school that was specifically preparing us for college, that was definitely the discussion in classes, in classrooms.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And as you're getting closer to that time frame as well, are there any teachers or mentors or people that are older recognizing anything about your creativity, kind of like your father did with your books early on that you're writing?
No, I mostly kept it to myself.
Okay.
Um, I I would write. I had a little green notebook that I would write poetry in. Like, I made sure that I wrote a poem at least once a week, and it was forced rhyming and all that stuff, bad poetry. But I loved it, walking around with this notebook. I kept it to myself. I don't think teachers really knew that I liked writing. I'm not gonna say I don't think. They didn't know it. I didn't share that part of me. Not even not Yeah, I didn't even share that part of me. I was gonna say not even with my friends, but that's not true. With my friends, the girls that we were hanging out with,
Yeah.
they knew that I liked writing poetry, and there was this one poem where it starts off as a love poem, like, all mushy, whatever, and then it ends with, her saying, "As I place the flowers upon your grave." And everybody was, like, always so shocked about that poem, because it's like we were used to writing love poems, right? "I love you," whatever.
Yeah.
And then it came as a surprise to everybody that I had this person, the love of this person's life, actually dead. And
Yeah.
so my friends loved me reciting that poem. And so they knew that I was one who wrote poetry. I didn't write stories just yet, but yeah, um, that was
Right.
the thing.
So, from my perspective, Queens, New York is a highly cultural environment, and it was the birthplace of quite a bit of hip hop um, through the 80s, 90s, even back in the 70s, even. Was there any of that type of cultural environment that maybe inspired some of your poetic writings at all?
Why possibly? I don't think I've ever thought about it in those terms before. We liked listening to a lot of rap. People like LL Cool J, Big Daddy Kane.
Yeah.
And then there was the hip hop music. I'm gonna say quite possibly those were influences, but I can't really pinpoint to any which one or
Okay.
in what capacity. But I loved listening to the slow R&B jams of the 80s, but of the 90s. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I love that stuff like Keith Sweat and Karen
Right.
White and all those people. Um and you know, and I noticed that for even my students today, like music is such an important aspect of young people's lives. I think it's become
Right.
like soundtrack to what's going on in their lives, and the music can say things better than they can. And I think that that was what was happening with us as well. So I'm sure it influenced my writing, my creativity in some respect. I just never really sat down to think about in what ways it happened.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Makes sense though. Makes sense. Did you have a particular school in mind for college, or again, was it a parental kind of guided uh decision?
No, no. My parents left it completely up to us which college we wanted to go to. But because I don't know how to make decisions on my own, I had no idea where I wanted to go.
Right.
My sister, who I mentioned already, who was so into drawing, she decided that she wanted to go to the Fashion Institute of Technology to study
Okay.
interior design. And I kind of envied that about her, that she knew what she wanted to do, but, I didn't, and all I knew at that time was that I loved writing. But it didn't make sense to study writing when I go to school because what can I do with a degree in writing, right? So I had no idea what I wanted to pursue in college. So if since I didn't know what I wanted to pursue, I didn't know what college I wanted to go to. Um, I think I ended up applying to St. John's University. I forgot there was one other school, and then I applied to Hofstra University because my cousin had gone to Hofstra and he raved about it. And I was just like, and then another cousin of mine was he had graduated a couple of years before us, but he was going to school at the same time my sister and I were going to college. And so he applied to Hofstra, and I was just like, okay, I'll apply to Hofstra too. Let's see what happens. And
Yeah.
Um, so let me tell you what happened when I applied to Hofstra.
All
Um,
right.
so remember that nun who had told me that I would have zero chance of getting into Francis Lewis High School, not Francis Lewis, St. Francis Prep. Um, I had my guidance counselor, who was also a nun, in my senior year, tell me that I was wasting my money by applying to Hofstra University because I could never get into a school like that.
My gosh,
Yes,
that's wild.
yes. And this story I tell my students all the time because I try to tell them, about I students for some reason look at their teachers as people who used to do well in school. And I always
Right.
try to emphasize to my students that I wasn't one of those kids. I was one of those students that teachers didn't like because I made their job harder because I just,
Yeah.
um, but so when I applied, so we would have one-on-one meetings with our guidance counselors, and I told her that I was going to apply to Hofstra University, and she told me that, well, your grades don't reflect that of a student who would go on to
You-
Hofstra University.
Yeah.
She said, You're just wasting your money by applying to that school." She said, "You know what? Why don't you apply to a 2-year college instead? Go to the 2-year college, and then maybe, just maybe, apply to Hofstra. Let's see how you do that." And I was just like, okay. And so I told one of my cousins, I was like, no, I'm not gonna apply to Hofstra anymore because my guidance counselor told me I would never get into a school like that. And my cousin was fuming. Now, this happened to be the sister of the cousin who had already gone on to Hofstra University, right?
Okay.
And this cousin, her name is Marie. She went on to become a lawyer. She's like this really, advocate for young people and all that. And so she was just like, how dare she tell you that you can't get into Hofstra University? You know what? but you're gonna apply anyway. And I was just like, okay. And I was accepted. I was accepted to Hofstra. And because I had applied really late in the school year, and because she said what she said, that I would not get into a school like that, I thought that I was an affirmative action acceptance, or
Right.
like I felt like they had to have fill in a quota of how many African American students that they accepted. And so I was one of them. But,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. It's just what I put in my head. Like, of course, that's why I was accepted to Hofstra, because she said that I would never get into a school like Hofstra. So it must be because they wanted to fill a quota. And
Right.
so when I told the guidance counselor that did, um, I was accepted to Hofstra, she said, "Oh," she didn't say congratulations. She didn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry that I was wrong." She didn't say anything like that. She was just like, "Okay." And
Oh my word.
yeah, yeah. And I'm very proud to say that, uh, I tell my students this all the time. Like all through high school, I was like, my average grade was like a 70. If I got an 80, it was like, let's throw a party, that type of thing.
Right.
So I tell my students, like, my first semester at Hofstra University was the first time in my life that I ever got straight A's. First time ever.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
I'm quite proud of that.
What was the do you remember, if you can, where that shift took place in your mind, in your body, in your spirit that allowed you to excel that drastically?
Yes, I will tell you exactly what it is, because I'm very aware of what it was.
Okay.
So there were three aspects to it. One, I wanted to prove that which wrong that I could do it.
Good. You,
Two,
yes.
even though I did get financial aid, it was still the hostel was very expensive. And so my father had to pay a lot of money for me to go to school. And
Okay.
I was I knew that he was a cab driver. I was very respectful of how my father made his money. And I
Yeah.
didn't want him wasting his money. So I made sure that I did well to I made sure I did well because he was paying for the bulk of it. And
Right.
three, I knew that I started studying a different way. Instead of trying to memorize information, I decided to understand the information. So in my
Oh,
classrooms, um, I sat up front. I sat in front all the time because I don't know if one of my cousins told me to do this, but because I felt like House University was predominantly white at that time. I don't know how it is now, but
okay.
I knew that I had to stick out, right? So I
Got
knew
you.
that the advantage for me would be that I would be probably one or two Black students in the entire class, and I was. And I made sure that I sat in the front in all my classes so my teachers knew who I was. I made
Yeah.
sure that I went to their office at least once a semester so they remembered me. So that when it was time to give out grades, instead of like an 85, oh yeah, I remember this girl. She sits in the front all the time. She does all her work. She comes to the office. Let me give her a 90. That was my way of thinking.
That's amazing, Kathy. And the reason that I say that, because I think that's such a huge example for many students across the board. Number one, I think that's a huge example for creatives as well, because as creatives, a lot of times we have um, uh, this complex of feeling unseen. But what you did was that uh, you took that element within yourself and you used it in a different way to be an advantage for you. You saw, okay, I need to do something to make a difference here, even though I may not internally really want to do this. But
Mhm.
from an external standpoint, I need to make sure that I'm seen. I need to make sure that people know I'm participating, I'm actively doing something to make sure you remember me. Make sure you recognize I'm putting in effort here. because you had a higher standard that was supporting you. You said that from the beginning. Your father literally came here and didn't just work for a cab company. He had his own cab company.
Yep.
And you knew how that he had set that example of hard work and doing for himself and then for his family as well. So I think that's a highlightable moment here in this conversation because it's a tremendous step forward out of a comfort zone of just sitting back thinking I'm not going to do well. So I'm just going to relax into that. Now at this point, you're like, oh no, I've got to change this. I've got to make something shift here. And to be able to say you did that in that first semester, like that's amazing to me. That's amazing. As you're starting to see that shift for yourself, are you starting to think about, all right, what can I possibly do next that just keeps this momentum moving?
In oh, okay, in terms of studying and making sure I keep getting the good grades.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, I what also helped to my advantage was that I was still incredibly shy, very shy, and I didn't really make friends while I was at Hofstra, which is one of the reasons why I tell all students that I come in contact with. I'm like, go away because you'll learn how to be independent, because I graduated Hofstra with virtually no friends, so it wasn't the uh, college experience that a lot of people usually have. But so I didn't really have that many. I didn't have friends while I was at school, so there was no distractions like that. And I had a system. I worked in the library at the school, and again, that was very strategic because I was going to work in a back office where I didn't have to um have conversations with anyone, didn't have to see anyone, and
yeah,
so I did that every day. I worked like maybe 1 or 2 hours there, and then I would come home and I would have a system where like it I would work on each subject for 1 hour. I would do everything that I needed to do for 1 hour. If I wasn't done by then, too bad. I would move on to the next subject. And it was until the end of the night. If I was still feeling good, if I wasn't too tired, I would go back to whatever it was that I didn't finish for the other subjects. This is what I did on a daily basis. And
oh wow,
and even if I finished my homework, I would go back and look at it and make sure that I understood what I was doing, what the information was about. So this was my system for a very long time throughout my college days, and it worked for me. And it helped that I again didn't have any distraction. I did have a boyfriend at the time who was not in college the same time I was, but I still managed to whenever I made time for him, I still managed to get some work done on those days as well. So that he wasn't that much of a distraction for me. But yeah, I was very conscious of what I was doing, how I was doing it, and then I realized that um I was so good with writing at that point. I was so good at writing papers because at the Mary Lewis Academy, I mean, we were always writing papers, essays, always, always, always. And when I
okay,
went to college, I realized that not a lot of people that were freshmen like I was knew how to write a decent essay. And
yeah,
and the teachers understood this. And I could get away with writing a mediocre paper for all my classes besides English. In English,
yeah,
I poured all my heart and soul into those essays. But in like social studies, or social in history, all the other subjects, if I had to write an essay, I wrote a mediocre paper knowing it would get 100, and I always got 100.
oh wow,
Yes. And I didn't spend so much mental energy on those assignments because I knew I was going to get a good grade. I knew just what to do to get a 100. But with my English classes, that's where I would pour all my heart and soul into because I loved my English classes. I loved the
Yeah.
reading. I loved the essays for it. So that's where I would put all my energy.
Again, for me, this is a highlight moment because the self-realization in that instance for you is so uh it's so, I would say, not normal for a lot of students, but yet it's so strategic. And that's what I find so interesting and want to highlight is the fact that you focused an hour on each subject, and whatever you did, it didn't matter if you finished what you needed to in that hour for the subject or not. You just kept moving in that structured system. And then you looked at it from the perspective of how do I feel once I've got through all of these? Do I feel like I can go back and put some more effort in? Like, I think that's huge for individuals just to be able to consciously be aware of what their body is telling them at certain points in time. Because as introverts, we're always bombarded with energy, other people's energy, other things taking place around us. And at times that becomes overwhelming. And it's hard for us to, a lot of times, decipher what is really ours or somebody else's. But being able to look at it from that perspective for you in your studies of saying, I'm just going to do this. Doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. I'm just going to do it and then move on. And if I feel good enough, I feel like I'm in that groove, I'll go back and do some more and then move out with it. And then when you're getting to your test, you already know, you know what? I don't have to put 100% there because I know I'm doing enough to be able to pass and be noticed enough to pass that grade. And you focus completely on what you really wanted to do and be that creative writing and that English component. And you poured the energy into that. I think it's very valuable if creatives, if students, if they're able to recognize where their gifts and talents are and double down on those things, then that will allow them to have more opportunity to be able to look at the other stuff, realize, all right, I still have to get this done, but I don't have to pour all of my effort into it.
Right.
I can do what I need to make sure I pass and move on, but I can double down on what I'm good at and allow that to move me forward.
Right.
That's, to me, that's amazing that you had that self-realization at that
Yeah.
point.
And you know what's interesting? Like I said, I was like a 70 student all
Yeah.
throughout high school. And I realized that education that I got in high school, even though I was by my peers' standard, I was a 70. By the time I got into high school, that 70 was what helped me excel. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So I got a really good education despite the grades. And I remember the first social studies, the first history, as we call it, social studies, the first history essay that I submitted, the professor was talking, he was just so disappointed with everybody's grades. Like, I forgot what he said. The gist of it was he was disappointed. He let us know before he handed us back our essays. And then when I see my essay, it has a big A on it. And on the bottom, he wrote, I was so impressed with your essay that I had to look you up. And I can't believe you're only a freshman. You would do well to tutor upperclassmen. That's what he
Oh,
wrote on my
wow.
paper. Yeah.
Wow.
That's when I started realizing, oh, I got something here. That was when I was a
Yes.
freshman, and to have a teacher write that to you, that's nice. That's nice. So it helped my ego.
Yeah. Especially after what you had just been told by the nuns.
Yes.
You're not going to do well. You're not going to, don't even apply. You're not
Yeah.
going to. you're not going to get in. And then
Exactly.
you flip the whole thing on its head, and you have a teacher saying, I think you would be great at helping others.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yep. Yep. I'm quite proud of that.
That's so amazing. So then from that point on, did you step into that role of tutoring others, working with others, or did you just focus on you?
I just focused on me. I just
Okay.
focused on me. Um, I think I was too shy to even like inquire about helping others, and I don't think I really wanted to. It was in a focus of mine. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just focused on me, and with all the good grades that I was getting that first semester, it helped build my confidence as a student, and so I just kept doing what I was doing to make sure that I kept the grades.
Right. Right. As you're coming towards the end of college, are you starting to think at that point, because now you've got 4 years of this writing that's working for you? Are you starting to think maybe I want to go into a career in writing?
So yes and no.
Okay.
So in my junior year, that's when we had to. That's the time limit they gave us to declare our major. And so I didn't know what else to do. I was here still thinking, okay, I love writing. Writing is my life. Writing is my passion. But there's still nothing for me to do with writing. And I don't want to become a teacher. So I don't know what to do. And so
Okay.
I just uh, there was nothing else that I was interested in. So I just declared creative writing and literature as my major, not knowing what I was going to do with it. And by the time I graduated, I didn't know, I was thinking, mu- every time somebody asked me what I want to do, I would always say, I want to be a world famous author and travel the world. Um, that was half joke, half like, yeah, that would be nice if that happened. But I said it
Yeah.
jokingly because I didn't really think it would, right? So
Right.
I knew that there was something else that I needed to do with my degree. I just didn't know what. Um, so I started looking for jobs as an editor or
Okay.
editorial assistant. And so that was my first job out of school. And me, I felt like me, and by this time, because I had taken creative writing and literature as my major, I had classes where I would write memoirs, I would write short stories, poetry, all those. So I started writing stories and all that stuff because remember in high school, I was only writing poetry. So now I was starting to write stories and I realized that I had a knack for it and I enjoyed writing my stories. And I even entered two contests when I was at Hofstra. I won honorable mention, honorable mention the first year, and the next year, excuse me, I shared the first prize with another student. And so
Cool.
by this time, I was feeling pretty confident of myself as a creative writer. And but I I still wasn't thinking like, let me write a novel now, or I don't know, but I don't know exactly what I was thinking, but I knew that I didn't think that becoming a writer would be in the books for me, at least not just yet. And so I was
Okay.
looking for editorial assistant positions after I
Okay.
graduated.
And then from that perspective, did you land a position with a publisher or uh, some kind of agency that was working with publishing?
So yeah, but it wasn't what I was really looking for. And
Okay.
because I was so quiet, I stayed in the job for so many years. It was called the H.W. Wilson Company, and they published what I remember um reference materials for library users, right? And
Okay.
my job, I was an editorial assistant, and my job was to look at like these entries that they would have for their um retrieval system to see if it was correct based on a piece of paper. Like, okay, one of the editorial assistants would take what's written on the paper and she would put it into the system. My job was to take her stack of papers and see if what she put on the system was equaled what was on the paper, right? I think
Okay.
that's what,
Got it.
yeah. And so that was my job, and it was so dull. It was so boring. I was bored out of my mind, but I I was too scared to go out looking for another job because I graduated in December of, what was it, 92? No, 96. I graduated in December of 96,
Okay.
and I didn't find that job until May of 97. So it took me quite a bit of time going on
Oh, wow.
so many different interviews. I mean, I was consistently going on interviews. And so that really made me hesitant to go and find another job. So I stayed at that job at the HW Wilson. I stayed there. Gosh, I want to say for like 4, maybe 5 years, not
Oh,
liking
wow.
it the entire time.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are you doing outside of work to compensate for that boredom that you just spent all day in?
I started writing a novel. I started writing a novel at that time, called United by Circumstance. And the premise was this young Black woman who was very, very fair skinned, who was approached by this white man and telling her, we're family, we're cousins. And it was all going, they explored their family history, their family tree, all going back to slavery times, and how they were connected. And I really liked this story, but I finally put it in a drawer. It was my learning story. I wrote the story. It, I learned to become a better writer with that one. But
Okay.
um but I that's what I was doing. I wrote that novel, and then I was hanging out with friends. I don't know what I was doing at that time, to be quite honest with you. I remember starting that story though, and before I let it go. But yeah, and then yeah, that's what I was doing.
Okay. And you said you spent 5 years in that job. At what point in those 5 years did you start to realize I've got to get out of here? This is not going to be sustainable for me.
I don't quite remember. I don't quite remember what pushed me to start looking for a job.
Okay.
Um, I know that at one point I was just like, there's nowhere else to move in this position. Um, I wish I remembered what made me finally start looking for another job. I probably just had had enough and was bored and felt like I could do more.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Okay. And then what is the next thing you step into?
so I got another job. I found another job at a small company called well a company called Avalon Publishing Group, and I was going to work for the imprint Thunder's Mouth Press. And that's when, so the first job that I had was in the Bronx, and I needed traveling to the Bronx. But this new job was going right in the middle of Manhattan and on Broadway. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so fabulous. I'm going to be working in Manhattan every day. So excited about that job. I really enjoyed that job. So I met group of great people. My boss was like the best boss you could ever hope to have. He was so
Yeah.
cool and he was such a nice guy. And I got to meet stars. I went to parties, like, publishing parties and stuff like that. It was really, I loved that job. And I was the person who was looking through manuscripts to hand over to my boss, who was the publisher. And I took care of to make sure that the books were copyrighted, and just a number of different things, or a number of different uh, duties that I had, and I just loved it. I liked the people that I worked with. It was just so much fun just working out, man. Hanging out with everybody. We'd hang out every once in a while, go to a bar, get drunk. Those were not my good days for me, but it happened. It happened. But yeah,
Right. And did those days play into the book, the box later on? Did that era of knowing that those weren't great days, did that
yes.
definitely play out for the storyline?
Yes, absolutely. Because that's when So I tucked away United by Circumstance, and that's when I started writing the box. And so I was like around 26, 27 at the time. Um, so I started writing it, and I think like maybe I don't remember how long it took me, but I eventually gave it to one of the editors at where I work so that she can read it and give me some feedback. And she gave me some wonderful feedback. She was just like, she called it a skeleton. She's like, this is a nice skeleton, but you need some meat, some more meat. We need to add in more details and things like that. And
Okay.
it took me it and I think I should say at this point that I wanted to write this book about a woman who was going through issues. That's what I called it. Like she was very bitter. She was very angry all the time. And it was during that time when I was diagnosed with depression.
Okay.
Um, and so I knew then that my main character was suffering with depression. That's when it
Got you.
all happened. So it's kind of a blur, but I know that that's around the time when it happened. And the reason why I was diagnosed with depression was because up until that point, I was always prone to fits of anger, fits of sadness. I would be cr- happy one minute and crying the next, like, or just, calm and just fine. And then all of a sudden I'd be bursting into tears and I didn't quite understand why. And my sister was like, this can't continue to happen. And she's the one who suggested that I see a therapist. And
Okay.
so that's when it was confirmed that I had depression.
Got you. Th- That's so much of a contrast from your sister's perspective early on as you guys are younger, not necessarily, you know, wanting to be around you at times, having a little bit of conflict in there. And yet now she's the one who recognizes, hey, my sister's struggling. I think you should do this to see if we can get something that helps you out and changes. Like that dynamic of shifting that love
Mhm.
relationship between siblings
Yeah.
is now coming into play to help you at a time when you're probably feeling your most low.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
wonderful.
Mm. Yeah. If she hadn't done that, I don't, I probably would have eventually tried to seek therapy, but not at that time. So she was the catalyst for that.
Yeah. Once you started looking at yourself with the help of somebody else, did that allow you to see different areas where you were able to get a glimpse of where things could be better? Or did she just kind of help you work through the emotional part of things?
When I started seeing the therapist,
Yeah.
yeah, it was I hadn't yet done the hard work of finding out what was going on.
Okay.
Um, but it was helping me deal with um the day-to-day issues, something that got me angry last week. Let's talk about why it got me angry, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But it was definitely the start of my journey into reflection. Just always thinking about why did I handle this way? Why am I doing this?
Okay. Is there anything specific that would be beneficial for the audience as creatives that kind of was like a light bulb moment of I'm doing this because of types and
Yes, but it didn't happen it didn't happen until much later.
okay.
I'm gonna say it happened maybe about 5, 7 years ago at this time, right?
All
So
right.
so my so I'm gonna say like my early 40s. So I was okay. So all this time that I had been seeing a therapist and always talking about my issues, like why am I so upset or whatever. And I think doing the hard work in therapy was what helped me understand why I was depressed in the first place. So
Mhm.
I was hanging out with my cousins and my sister, and then we were watching a program, like a documentary program where this woman was in an army, in the army, and she was I think, sexually assaulted by, you know, people there. And
Okay.
it wasn't that her story was similar to mine, but it sort of kind of it helped me come to the realization that I had never forgotten this, but I pushed it so far away that it was not in the forefront of my mind. That
Uh,
when I was 12 years old, around the sixth grade, I
okay.
had been, I wasn't assaulted, but I was sexually, s- somebody touched me the wrong way.
Okay.
And that was, in looking back, that was the start of my depression.
Got you. Okay.
We were playing hide and seek. It was like a summer night around 8 o'clock. It was already dark out. Playing hide and seek with the girls who lived across the street from my cousin's house, and they thought that those girls had their friends over, and among those friends were some boys.
Yeah.
And so we were playing hide and seek. I went into my cousin's backyard, um, to hide, and there was a lot of bushes and whatnot over there. And there was one of the boys that was there, and he was like, "Let's hide together." I was like, "Sure, no problem." This is me, innocent little 12-year-old who doesn't, Anyway, and so we hid in the bushes, and he was behind me. He had his like hands on my waist, and he started moving his hands further down where they should not be. And
Right.
I'm still looking out. They're not where they're supposed to be, his hands, and I'm still looking out like to make sure nobody's seeing us. This is how innocent it was. And then
Yeah.
and then I remember pulling his hand up to my waist and say, "Don't hold me down there, just hold me up here." And then he moved his hands back down and said, "Don't worry, I won't tell nobody." I remember those
Mm,
words specifically. As soon as he said that, oh my gosh, my heart leaped and I knew exactly what was happening. And I removed his hands from me and I ran inside my cousin's house. And
okay.
there was a bunch of aunts there, a couple of older cousins there. They saw me, they were like, "Hey, Kathy," and I don't know how I responded. All I know is that I didn't say anything to them. I was so shocked. I was just like, "Oh my gosh, that did not just happen." And then I went back outside and there was one of the girls out in the front where the street lamps were on, and I told her, I said, I'm not playing anymore." And she's like, "What happened?" I said, "There was some guy in the back that he started touching me and I don't know who it was." And she was just like, "What?" And I saw him climbing the fence from where we were. And I was
Okay.
like, "That's him. That's him. He's the one who held me," or whatever I said. And then I ran to him. And I think it was, I was feeling brave, not because, well, one, I was angry, and two, or because there were other people around. So I knew if I did something to him, then, I would pretty much be safe, right? So I
Right.
ran up to him and I started pounding on him. "Don't you ever do that to me again. Don't you ever." Pounding. And everybody was like taken aback. What the hell is happening? Some people were laughing, not really sure what to do. And then
Right.
and his friends took off. They ran off or whatever. And I don't know if at this point I was crying or I don't really remember. Um, but I told them what happened, and um, I never told any adults. I didn't tell my parents or anything like that because if I felt like if I told my parents, I'd get in trouble for just hanging around boys in the first place, you know?
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And um, so watching that program with my cousins, like 30 some odd years later, my sister said, "Oh my gosh, I remember that night." She said, "I remember that after that night, you were never the same." And I was like,
Mm,
and she's like, "Yeah, you were kind of standoffish, quiet." And I was just like, I never really realized that. And so now I started thinking about, oh my gosh, that's the time when I went into sixth grade. I was always crying. The teachers never knew what to do with me. Everybody used to always be like, "Carmel, your sister's crying again." I was like,
right.
gosh, that's when I started feeling depressed. That's when it started.
Wow.
Yeah.
It, it it happens so many times where an instance like that completely changes uh, a trajectory of our lives. And a lot of it has to do with our own internal um, conversation that takes place of uh, embarrassment,
Mhm.
feeling like it was our fault that something like that took place. In reality, not our fault at all. It's somebody else's problem
Mhm.
that, got uh, put onto us in a way that, changed us. With those things that take place, and also too, our mind wants to do things to try and protect us moving forward.
Absolutely.
So it'll create scenarios, it'll create stories, it'll create ways for us to cope. Saying if you do this, then you'll feel better. Or if you do that, you'll feel better. And it's just always trying to protect us. And that's why, I have this saying at the end of every one of these episodes, be kind to your mind. It's because I was able to come to a realization that my mind has just been trying to keep me safe and the way that it does or thinks it knows how. But the reality is that's not what my soul needs to keep moving forward and to expand and to create, to love, and to become the things that it's supposed to be. But the mind has a way of being able to tamp all of those things down and kind of keep it in a box.
Wow.
Uh, you wrote that box story,
Mhm.
title of your novel, exploring those themes of identity and depression and the resilience. As you came to that realization in that moment, did that allow you to kind of like fast forward, reflect, and realize, okay, I can start changing some things now?
Yes, yes and no, because I lived with it for so long. So now I was aware of it, right?
Yeah.
And I did reflect and I went back. I'm like, oh, now I understood why I kept having complicated relationships with men. Now I understood that. And so I was very aware of that. And I had to revisit it again. So I talked to my therapist about it and I cried all over again as if it had just happened. I had to go through that again. But even though I was very aware of mm, where my depression stemmed from, I think having lived with it for so long and lived with the way that I've been for so long, it still showed up when
Okay.
I got married, right? So
Mm,
so it still showed up within my marriage, being very aware of what had happened. And I even told him, the man that I married, that what had happened and how I dealt with it and all that stuff. I so being very aware of it and open about it, um, I it didn't stop. It didn't prevent me from behaving certain ways in my relationship with my husband.
gotcha.
I'm since divorced, but I feel like there was still a lot of trauma to that needed unearthing that came out when in my dealings with him and arguments and stuff like that.
Got you. Got you. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Did you realize at any point in time that your writing was also a way for you to do that coping and to do that healing work uh,
Yes.
to progress yourself further?
Yes, yes. I realized very early on, um, well, I'm not gonna say very early on. I realized at some point that every time I wrote, anytime I was writing, I was at my happiest. And at one point I created a blog called Kathy's Cross, a Depressive's Positive Perspective.
Mm,
And in that I would take certain things that happened in my life that I probably handled poorly or whatever. I would take certain scenarios and look at it through the lens of somebody who now understands the depression that she was suffering with, right? And try to spin a positive perspective onto it. And doing that blog helped me really go back to different events in my life and reflect on it. And I feel like writing about it, thinking about it, reflecting on it, I think all of those things really helped me deal and really was a source of healing for me. I
Yeah.
really feel that way. So it was a good thing that I created that blog. And even writing my novel, The Box, I took all the pain that I was feeling as a depressed person. I gave it all to my main character. I Hey, you figure out what to do with it. I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
You know, I gave it all to my main character. And in doing so, I really felt like I was unleashing that burden onto the page.
That's an interesting title for the blog, Cassie's Cross. I see that harkening back to the Catholic school influence.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Once you started seeing how that writing was becoming the thing that was going to allow you to express differently, to share differently, and create differently, and you start winning these awards that you've gained this recognition over. Most recently, probably the 2024 and 2025 awards that you received for the Black Writers Workspace. Did that start building up some more? I wouldn't say probably all, but is it building up some more confidence for that introvert?
It is, excuse me, it is and it isn't. Because
Okay.
I feel like I do believe that I deserve the recognition that I got. I'm not gonna say that I don't,
Okay.
but because I do like the way I put words together. I am impressed sometimes. I look at my work and I'm like, wow, that came from me. And I like being impressed with what I created. So I really believe that I'm a good writer. But at the same time, um, I I am self-published, right?
Oh,
I did start seeking an agent for my novel, The Box, and I hadn't heard it was crickets, you know. I mean, every time I hear writers talk about finding an agent, they get all these rejections. And I'm like, I didn't even get one rejection. Nobody even responded. So I was like, what
oh
happened?
wow.
Yes. That aspect of it was like, oh my gosh, you know, is my writing not even that great that they're not even responding to me? Um, and so while I was recognized for my writing in some, excuse me, in some literary circles, in like for agents and stuff like that, I just didn't get anywhere with that. So it kind of felt like, um, and sometimes I feel like I'm a good writer, but not good enough for an agent, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm don't get me wrong, I'm proud of my novel. I'm proud of publishing it, everything I did thus far. But a part of me still wishes that I finished it earlier to have that patience to seek an agent because it could take up to a few years. And by the
Yeah.
time I was ready to publish it, I was like, I waited so long. I started it like when I was 25, 26 years old. And so I
Okay.
was just like, I've waited. It's been so long already, you know, stagnant, like, or doing anything. I kind of want to bring it out now. I don't want to wait another 5, 10 years to bring it out. So that's what I did.
Well, again, another highlightable thing that I want to point out for the creative community is the fact that sometimes the awards are good for one thing for us, but then also too, they're not good for another thing because it's that balance beam that's always in play as creatives. It's like, are we going to get accepted? Are we going to get accolades? Are we going to get acknowledgement? Or are we just going to continue to create and create? great, great. Nobody's really paying attention.
Right, right.
I think so many of us struggle with that balance beam, that seesaw of back and forth. And if we do have the opportunity to win some awards, great. Uh, I know for myself, I've had opportunities to do quite a few things um, with some big people, with some big companies, and get recognition like that. But at this point, all it is just a resume piece.
Yeah.
It hasn't propelled me in a direction where you would think, oh, wow, you work for that company and did that? That's amazing. Well,
Mm.
it was great at the time, and it's not doing anything for me now. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think that ability for you to decide, you know what, this has just got to happen. I'm not going to wait any longer. These things have to come out. They have to be out to the world and do their thing, whether it's just for me that I'm doing this or for somebody that may just pick it up off the shelf one day or see it online somewhere and say, you know what, I'm interested in that. I want to see what that's about. And it changes their life, right? It may just be one person. Um, but I think those are the things that as creatives, um, we don't necessarily recognize, but I think it's the potential and possibility that what we do create, if it affects one person and changes one person, then how great really is that? That's tremendous. Right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Once you put that out, at what point do you start realizing, I think I want to start mentoring other writers, younger writers, people that have not walked the path that I've walked. But because I've walked it, now I want to start sharing that story with them and helping guide them along, as the nuns did not do for me early on.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's so funny because I I still feel very much like an amateur. And that I even though I had somebody helping me do the publishing process, and I felt like if she didn't help me the way that she did, I'd have been completely lost. I needed somebody to hold her hand, and I don't feel like I can be that person for for my peers, for anyone else, right?
Mm.
But what I did at school when as a teacher, I had the creative writing club, and that was my second year having the creative writing club. And because I had just finished publishing my novel, The Box, some of the steps were fresh in my mind. And I was just like, I can do this with my creative writing students, like have them publish a book. Like, how cool would that be? And so I applied for a grant. And that's through a network. It's called the Student Leadership Network that supports my school with different opportunities for the students. So I applied
Okay.
for a grant saying that it would be really great if the students could publish their own book, but we would need funds in order to get the cover done, all this stuff, whatever. And I got the grant, and I was very excited about it. And I tried to recruit so many students, but you know, I what I felt like there were a core group of students who did come, and who stayed. There were a lot of students who joined the club at first, but then they got bored because all we did was write. And I'm like, what's a
Yeah.
writing club? But the students who stayed, they really wanted to write a book about eh, mystery and suspense and all that. And I was like, can't we write like inspirational stories? But they really wanted the suspense and all that. And so
Okay.
that's what we did. And I acted as their editor. I would tell them, show them how they could make the stories better. And even one of my students was like, "Oh, thank you for pushing me. I really liked the way the story turned out." So I was able, with the grant that we that we received, we were able to get a really great cover for the book. We were able to uh, eh, get create a book release party where we got a whole bunch of things so that people could come and eat, snack on food and just all this stuff for the students. And it was so beautiful seeing the excitement in their faces. Wait, hold on one second. This is, it's just, this is what the book looks like. It's called Masquerade of Lies.
Oh,
And
cool.
I wrote, written by the Creative Writing Club.
No,
And they're the ones who came up with this concept for the cover. And I sent it off. I forgot what company I used at this point, and I asked them to create something like it, and that's the cover that they came up with. And I mean, and seeing their faces when they opened the book and saw their names in print, like, you can't ask for anything more, really. You
right.
know, it was just such a fabulous way of of letting the students know that they can do something like this. It's their stories, their creative imagination. I mean, some of the stories are downright silly, well, but that's the fun of it, you
Yeah.
know? And I was just so proud of them, and I was so happy about it. And I felt like I started complaining to them. I'm like, nobody wants to be in this club anymore. You guys aren't doing what you're supposed to do. And then the next week they would come and they're like, Miss Jean, look what I did. And and it was just it was just so nice to see that their hard work paid off, that they were excited about it. And I want them to be able to look back, like in their 20s and 30s, to be like, oh man, we actually did this. We published a story in this book, and
Right.
when I was their age, like in high school, like I said, I would write poetry and stuff, but I kept it to myself. Nobody knew about it. But imagine where I would be today if I had somebody telling me
Yes.
that your work is good enough to be published. And
Yes.
and the confidence that I would have, the audacity that I would use to go beyond where I had gone, like go beyond where I thought that I couldn't go.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Having the audacity. That's, again, I'm going to shine a light on that. Having the audacity to explore, to
Mhm.
create, and see where it takes you. Uh,
Yeah.
because who knows what can take place?
Exactly.
It could change the complete direction of your life exponentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because now it's a part of your mindset. You got this done and somebody believes in you. So you could do it again. You could do more. So
Right. That's wonderful. Wonderful. And what an amazing piece of legacy that you gave for those students with that book. It, as long as it's around, it's around. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It's there, it's out there. And because you went through that process of self publishing, it was all fresh to be able to show them, hey, you don't have to sit and wait for an agent. You don't have to sit and wait for a publishing company.
Yeah.
You can write this, you can create this, and you
Mhm.
can put this out in your own time as you feel like it.
Exactly.
And I think that's just tremendous because so many times we get stuck because we're watching everything, right? We're
Mm.
seeing what's on TV, hearing what's on the radio, or on our feeds of social media, whatever. And we think those are the traditional ways that we need to succeed, whether it's a record label or it's a film company or it's a publishing company. I think those are the only ways that we're going to just propel ourselves into the stratosphere. But it's 2026.
Yeah,
Everything's different. Oppor-
exactly.
Opportunity is at your fingertips, literally with your
Mm.
phone. Uh, you can create something, put it out, and wake up the next morning and the whole world has seen it. Like that possibility for students now if they choose to put something creative out there that is from their heart, that is not just for the clicks, but is truly authentic, I think those are the things that take off.
Yeah.
And I know since the pandemic, I've watched, I don't know how many musicians that have just started making TikTok videos and now are touring the world
Yeah.
within that short amount of time. Like they made that drastic jump into stardom. And it's all possible. That's the beauty of it. It
Yes.
literally is possible. You just have to have that audacity to go ahead and do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it does take a certain amount of confidence in yourself as well. But I feel like it's worth taking that risk. It's worth taking
Yes.
that risk. Uh, you know, I mean, my novel. It's not like, I mean, I don't really create ads for it or promote it or do much of that right now because I feel a little overwhelmed with work and everything else that I'm doing. But I know it's out there. I know it's out there, and I know that there've been some people who've read it and it touched them, and I feel and that doesn't take away the pride that I feel in doing what I did. And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean like it stops now. Like I'm going to New Orleans next month with my sister for a book festival where I'm going to be selling my book. And I've never been to New Orleans before. So publishing this book has led me to New Orleans. You know what I mean? Like we
And
don't know where our decisions will take us. And I don't know who I'm gonna meet out there. I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's an exciting opportunity and exciting to think about what I could do out there. Who I could
yeah.
meet. Yeah.
And what's amazing too, from my perspective of just this conversation and your story, is the fact that New Orleans historically is rooted in that Creole language uh, and that culture, and for you to be able to have that as your origin, now being to able to go step into that world with
Yeah.
your creative book
Yeah.
put together and
Yeah.
share it in that arena. I imagine
Absolutely.
it's going to be something special for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I look
That's
forward
great.
to it.
That's great. This was truly wonderful, Kathy. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, one of the things I always want to remind the audience, and this is definitely evident in your story, is to always listen to your heart, but
Yeah.
in the same breath, be kind to your mind.
Love that.